Father, we do come into your presence at this time, asking you to open up our minds and expand our minds and cause us to have the kind of understanding that we need to deal with the subject that's before us. And we pray that you would lead us into all truth, the truth of your word, the truth of your world, and the truth of your works. We lift all of these things up in the name of Jesus. Amen. All right, well, let's talk about Egypt, which is probably what you were hoping that I would do a long time ago anyway. Egypt, interestingly enough, used to hold suzerainty. Suzerainty is a fancy word for everybody paid them protection. And they used to hold suzerainty over a vast region. Over what we call Palestine now. They, along with the Phoenicians and some others, dominated the Mediterranean. They were a vast empire for over 1,200 years and had a great deal of control over all of these regions. Historically, Egypt is still ruling all of those areas because Egypt is the standard historically for historiography in all of the Middle East and in the Mediterranean region, and actually just about everywhere in the Old World. If you go to, say, Bulgaria or something and you dig up a grave, then you're going to have to refer to Egyptology for where you're going to date that grave. All right? So the standard of Egyptology is ruling everything that goes on in ancient historiography. So we haven't gotten free of Egypt yet, but we need to. And what this does is it makes Egyptologists the great high priests of historiography, of ancient historiography. And that's because they pretend to hold the absolute on how to go about finding dates for things. Now, the problem arises of dealing with time in ancient history because we divide history in half. And, you know, as if it's a mathematical equation. Everything is plus over here and minus over here. So this is AD, Anno Domini, year of our Lord, and this is BC, which is before Christ, or this is the common era, whatever that means.
And when did that change? And BC, I mean.
Yeah, and BCE, before the common era, you know. I don't, you know, what's common about an era? And you notice it divides in the same place, so it's like, hey, whatever. Okay, but anyway, and this is how we do it. And everything on this side is nice because it's happening. And so we've got good dates here for the most part. Although Jesus was born in 6 BC. So, you know, oh boy. All right. Now everything on this side is more complicated because they didn't write history this way. They didn't go, okay, now Jesus is going to come, you know, around 4000 BC or about 4000 BC AD, whatever that is. And so we need to gear all of our stuff up for that. Of course, they didn't do that. What they did is they wrote their history locally and temporally, which means that what you're going to get are these little dotted lines here and there. This is how history is written. And that's as it gets older and older, okay? And what you have to do is connect these dots together. You have to find out connections between these little dashes. And what these represent is usually something like regnal years, which is how, a king reigns, and then his son reigns, and then his son reigns, and his son reigns, and then that ends because somebody kills the great-great-grandson and takes over, and a new dynasty begins. And there may be some periods where there's civil wars or whatever, nothing's particular going on, or the whole country breaks down into little sections, nomes or whatever, that are being ruled by petty princes and stuff like that. And there's no records on these things or anything. All you have are just these dashes here, okay? And this is how it's written. So in order to make a line out of this, you've got to do a lot of studying all over the place to see if you can find connections between these, and some are found. But really, if you get right down to it, the number of them that have been connected together is only going to represent a few dotted lines along here. So you got big gaps. You got huge gaps in all of this. Now, right in the middle of all of this, there is one history that's been written that covers the entire period in a continuum, year after year after year. And it is the genealogies of the Old Testament. The genealogies of the Old Testament covers this entire period. And so it provides what you might call a spine for historiography. And that's what you need. What you need here is you need a straight line that's running through here that you can take references off of for all of these other things. And we have one. And it's the genealogies of the Old Testament. Bishop Ussher, when he wrote his book on ancient history, used the genealogies of the Bible and then began to make his connections with things on the outside. Now, a lot of historical research has come up since that took place. So some of his stuff is, some of his studies are a bit obsolete, incomplete. There are things that can be added without changing anything that he said. There are also some things that, not many though, amazingly enough, there's not that much that needs to be taken out of it, but there's much that should be added into it, and some things modified and sort of brought up to date. But it's really a pretty good history of ancient history because it uses the Bible as that spine that's running all the way through here, all right? And we'll talk about that in another installment, because this genealogy here, we need to ask ourselves the question, is that reliable? And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how reliable is that genealogy. But before getting into all that, just ask yourself this question: which is better, this green line or these red ones? All right? I mean, this right here is something we need to take seriously, because it is representing to us, we've got a complete record right here. These right here, they're not going to be very helpful. It's going to be hard to make these helpful. And that's the way it was until Egyptology came along. And Egyptology provided, and I'm going to do it like this, okay? It provided a line through history. The genealogies of the regnal or dynastic genealogies of the kings stretches all the way to what they call the beginning of Egypt. All right? But you notice it's not like this line. All right? It is very dotty and strange. All right? Not only that, but this line is the interpretation of what's been found. Because I want to say this: there is no document that has been found in Egypt that covers that whole period. Not one. What you have, and let's show it the way it really is. What you have is this. And we'll we'll say probably something like this and that, and it gets a little better as it gets closer to the future. So in other words, you don't have one line, you have a whole bunch of them all over the place. You've got these genealogies here that have spots. Here's one spot for, say, the 18th dynasty. Here's one here for the 22nd dynasty. Here's one here for the third intermediary period. Here's these, they're all over the place. They're in, the one's in this pyramid over here, one's in the Valley of the Kings, one's in Thebes, one's in Damarna, one's here, one's there, all over the place. Now, the thing is, did they put all of these together properly? And that's our big question right there. Did they put these together properly? Now, once again, let's establish this. From BC back a certain way, and actually about 6 centuries, we're pretty good. Our dates are pretty good, all right? But from there back, it gets sketchy. And this is what we have to go with here, all these flutterings of genealogies all over the place. According to the Egyptologists, they've got this worked out. They have a line of genealogy running all the way back to the beginning of Egypt. And the beginning of Egypt is somewhere around between 5,000 and 6,000 BC. That immediately causes us some problems because as far as we know from the scriptures, there was no earth in 6,000 BC, all right? So if there was an Egypt hanging around out there in outer space somewhere, then, you know, I'll consider it. But you see how they've stretched things out so long. Is that really a true representation of Egypt, of Egyptian chronology? Or have they just stretched it out in the wrong direction? We'll talk about what some of the problems of those are as we go along. One of the first things that we need to deal with as we begin to move back in time in ancient history is that what we want to see, we'll just kind of make a little, you know, pillar out of this, right? Looks like an atom bomb exploding. We have 4 pillars. This is according to conventional wisdom. We have 4 pillars of absolute dates in ancient history. The first pillar is the sacking of Thebes, and I'm going to put this over here as if it's in more recent time, 646 BC. The sacking of Thebes by Ashurbanipal, when he went down into Egypt, took his armies down into Egypt, and overran Thebes, the capital of Egypt, during the time of Tirhaka, the Nubian, the Nubian pharaoh at that time. Okay. Number 2 is year 925 BC. Now, to connect, remember all those dashes and dots that I did. If you want to connect those together, you need some absolute dates you can tie them to. That's what they're looking for, all right? 925 BC. This is the plundering of Jerusalem by Shishak, whoever that was, all right? 925 BC, the plundering of Jerusalem during the time of Rehoboam. Remember, Solomon had a son, Rehoboam, and Rehoboam lost the 10 tribes of Israel. The northern part of Israel went to Jeroboam the first, and Jeroboam was friends with the Pharaoh of Egypt. He had been in his court for a while. He had fled from Solomon, gone down to Egypt, kind of hung out with the Pharaoh down there for a while, came back to rule the northern tribes of Israel, And when he did, he called upon the Pharaoh of Egypt, Shishak, to come and conquer Judah. And so he did. The Pharaoh came, took a bunch of cities in Judah, actually came up to the walls of Jerusalem, and Rehoboam gave him all of the gold that was in the temple that Solomon had put into the temple. And Shishak went home satisfied that he had taken suzerainty, so to speak, from them. All right. 1550 BC. Is another of the pillars. It is the date for the first year of the Egyptian New Kingdom. The Egyptian New Kingdom. And I'm going to talk about the New Kingdom period and all that kind of stuff in just a few minutes. But it is the date of the beginning of the New Kingdom, according to what's called the Ebers calendar, which was a papyrus that was found by a guy named Ebers. Hence he got to put his name on it. And it has a Sothic dating, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, of the 9th year of Amenhotep I. And so from this papyrus, they've derived an absolute date of 1550 BC using astronomy. All right? So that's the third pillar. The fourth pillar is 1228 BC. And actually, these are not in order chronologically, but it's 1228 BC. And this is the date that Ramses II became king of Egypt. Ramses the Great became king of Egypt, 1228 BC, according to these pillars. So, pillar number 1, pillar number 2, pillar number 3, pillar number 4. These are used as absolute dates in connecting the dots to form a spine of time running through the ancient period. So from 646 to 1550 BC, we've got these that can be used for making those connections. This is how they make those connections, using these pillars. All right. Now, the problem with pillar number 4 is that it is totally dependent on pillar number 5. So or pillar number 3. So if pillar number 3 goes, so does pillar number 4. And the problem with pillar number 3 is a misinterpretation in the reading of the Ebers calendar. A misinterpretation in the reading of the Ebers calendar. Now, I'm not going to explain all that because it has to do with Sothic dating and so forth. It's highly technical. But this papyrus that was being used for this has been misread, and that is the truth. So, this goes. And when this goes, so does that. So we've just lost 2 pillars right here. And these pillars are in very key positions too. 1228 is the beginning of the Bronze Age, or the Late Bronze Age, or it is in the Late Bronze Age. And then 1550 BC is the changeover between 2 eras in Egypt. What about pillar number 2? Pillar number 2 assumes that Shishak and Shoshank are the same pharaoh. And they are not. And we can prove that. So much for pillar number 2. Pillar number 1 is an absolute date. And it's the only one we've got. So the furthest back we can go for an absolute date is 646 BC, the sacking of Thebes by Ashurbanipal. All right? That's it. Can't go back any further than that. Now, we can interpret things back from here a little distance, but that only about within a century. tying it to this, we can establish dates further back. But as we get further and further away from this date, it gets more and more difficult. We run back into our dotted lines again. All right. And this is what every historian dealing in ancient history has to deal with, which is why historians have a tendency to resort to things like radiocarbon. And we're going to talk about these dating methods some. I can recommend to you books on it. There are several creation books that deal with the dating methods. They're all very problematic. Radiocarbon, potassium argon. And these are the recent history ones. After that, you get into uranium lead tests and things of that sort, which is supposed to give you dates that are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of years ago, and all this kind of stuff. And these are extremely problematic, and we'll talk about why at another time. I'm not going to get into that right now. Actually, most archaeologists today avoid these dating methods now. And the reason why is because they've had so many embarrassing results with those things that they just don't even want to go there anymore. And so for the most part, they just try to stay away from radiocarbon dating. Even radiocarbon dating within the last 2,000 years has kicked up some strange numbers. But anyway, so that's basically the kind of tools that are being used. And maybe I'll just say this this thing about the carbon dating methods, the potassium argon methods, and all of the other ones. And by the way, there's a whole host of them. There's lots and lots of different chemical dating methods and isotopic dating methods and so forth. Basically what they are is that, you know, if you've got a clock and your clock ticks, but it doesn't talk, then you've got to come up with another clock that talks but doesn't tick. And then you've got to come up with another one that corrects that one, and another one that corrects that one, and another corrects that one. So the whole list of dating methods are just one after another that's trying to fill in the flaw of the one before, or to try to confirm it. And getting confirmation, or what they call absolute dates off of these things, is extremely elusive. So this is, you know, it sounds good in a textbook to say radiocarbon dating, say so-and-so happened 1,541 years ago on August the 7th at 7 o'clock p.m. I'm sorry, but they'll never get anything anywhere close to that exact, all right? And that's the purpose of them. So here's what we're stuck with. This is it, 646 BC. That's our absolute date, as far back as we can go. It's not too far. Interestingly enough, this is right at the verge of our problem zone. And our problem zone reaches from about the 8th century to the 12th century BC. That's our problem zone, as we're going to see. And in Egyptian chronology, this falls into a period of time called the TIP, the Third Intermediate period.
Just out of curiosity, where did that date come from?
646?
Yeah, what's that 664?
664, I'm sorry. I just got my 6 and 4s messed up. It's supported by a host of interlocking data. There are several pieces of, and interestingly enough, all of these interlocking data for keying into that date are all inscripturated. In other words, they're written. So it has to do with some astronomical phenomena. It has to do with letters written back and forth that are contiguous with each other. It is a good date. It has a lot of testimony behind it. None of the rest of them has anything like that kind of testimony. So yeah, there's just a whole host of things that ties that together, including the Bible. 2 Kings 19:9 mentions not the sacking of Thebes, but it does talk about Tirhakah at that very particular period of time from biblical chronology fits perfectly into this period of time. And that's the Assyrian period in Egypt. Okay. Egyptian history, or the Egyptian timeline kind of goes like this. You start with Old Kingdom and Middle Kingdom. New Kingdom, and then late period. I don't know why I never can remember that. Late period. And that's the history of Egypt in a nutshell right there. We're not concerned about this or this. We are concerned about this becoming this, the New Kingdom becoming the late period. All right? Because that's where our period of time from about 500 to 1000 BC is, right there. It is what is called the Late Bronze Age, moving into the Early Iron Age period. And we're going to talk about Iron Ages and Bronze Ages too later, but for right now we'll leave that aside. Okay. Between the New Kingdom period and the late period, well, let's just put it this way. The New Kingdom ends with the 20th dynasty of Egypt. The late period begins with the 26th dynasty. And in between, these two is the TIP, the Third Intermediate Period, which goes from the 21st to the 25th dynasty. There's our problem zone right there. That's a period of time of about 500 years, all right? We'll get more specific later, but it's a period of time of about 500 years. And it is what is separating these two periods. The late period is when Egypt was no longer ruling itself. It begins with the Persians, and then, or the Assyrians, which 664 is when Ashurbanipal, the Assyrian king, took over Thebes. The Persian, the Greek, and the Roman periods. So it's Egypt not being ruled by Egyptians, all right? That's what the late period is. The New Kingdom is the end of true Egyptian rule. The TIP is an intermission where the Egyptian rule begins to fade out and the Nubian rule takes place. So the Nubian pharaohs, the black pharaohs of Ethiopia, are going to be ruling Egypt during this period of time. And when they do, it's a time of renewal. They actually manage to to renew the vitality of Egypt for a short period of time. But the Assyrians are very powerful by this time. They come in and they take over Egypt. All right. So here's the section. Here's the area we want to talk about right here in Egyptian chronology. The central problem is the Third Intermediate Period. And from 664 to 1069 is that period, which is a period, I said 500, I'm sorry, 405 years. That's 405 years. And here's our question. Is this right? Is this right? Because if it's not, then there's a huge amount of time that has expanded history right here in this period. Right in this period. According to basic Egyptian chronology, we have a number of genealogies of the TIP period. We have the Kanimebre genealogy, the Nespaharenhat genealogy, and then we have the genealogy of the high priest of Ptah. And a bunch of other ones too. But those three are the main ones. They're the main supports for the TIP. The problem is that these are not true genealogies. All they do is give a regnal year. That is, the year of the rule of the king. They give no duration of time, no certain duration of time. You know, you remember how in the Bible, in a true genealogy, it works like this. In the Bible, it will tell you that the father, okay, F lives this long duration. F lives this long, has a son at this point in his life. And the son lives this long and has his son too, at this point in duration. So in other words, we can take these durations, add them up, and we have a succession of years that takes place. We have an absolute duration that takes place. None of these genealogies are written this way. These genealogies just simply say something about passing it on to his son in the X regnal year. Well, that's not going to tell us anything if we don't know what his father's beginning date was, or his father's beginning date was, or his father's beginning date was. So the problem that we have with all of these genealogies is we have no duration in them at all.
And a lot of them overlap too.
We're going to talk about overlap. Because one of the reasons why this is expanded right here is because of big time overlap. Sometimes the kings sometimes these pharaohs, some of them are in the north and some of them are in the south, and they're both ruling at the same time. And in fact, 10 kings may rule at the same time as 10 kings. The Egyptologists have put them up like this, and that stretches them out. I'm going to talk about one in just a minute, as a matter of fact. All right, now let me talk to you for a minute about some contradictory evidence to these genealogies. Number one, a guy named Mariette, I think back in the 1920s or something like that, was fiddling around the Sphinx. Actually, the Sphinx was dug out of sand because it was totally buried when they first found it. And so they were digging sand away for decades. And this guy named Mariette comes along, and he is doing some of the sand digging to try to get the Sphinx back out again. And he finds out that attached to the Sphinx is a temple complex, and we call that one the Serapeum. This temple complex, the Serapeum. And he got into this temple complex, and inside of it he found, and it was huge. It was as big as the Sphinx, or as much volume or as much room space inside as the Sphinx was long and wide. And so they got in there and they found rooms, chambers all over the place on the inside of it. And inside of some of these rooms, they found humongous coffins. I mean, big coffins. And so they pulled the lids off of those things, and lo and behold, there was a mummified bull inside of it. 23 of them, 23 mummified bulls. These are called Apis bulls. And these were very special bulls. They were sacred. They were bred specially. And during their entire life, they were fed, pampered, they had gold chains and all kind of stuff all over them. They were treated like kings. When they died, they were mummified, buried with great ceremony. All right? In the Serapeum, they found 23 of them. And they also found a stela. And we called this the Apis stela. A stela is, and this should be familiar to you, a stela is a thin piece of stone that writing is on. That's what Moses brought up to God to write the law on, a stela, exactly like these kind of stela, all right? And this stela has writing on it, and the writing on it is when each one of those bulls was buried, by what king and in what regnal year. One after another. Now that's not a bad record there, all right? However, it still doesn't give us duration. But it does give us a straight line running through 23 Apis bulls and running through about a dozen pharaohs. And it covers a period of time. Actually, the first bull was buried by Ramses II, and the last one by Psamtik I. And according to Egyptian chronology, between these two kings is a period of 606 years. All right, now you may be thinking about this already and going, 23 bulls in 606 years? Ramses II, Ramses the Great, that puts us in the third intermediate period, okay? Right at the beginning of it. And Psamtik I, who actually is in the late period, all right? 606 years. 23 bulls. Now, all they can do, some of them tell how long a period of time, or how old the bull was when it died. All of them have that up there, but many of them you can't read. All right. But one of the things that they figured from it was these bulls live an average of 18 years. Don't go any further than that. So if you take the duration period to 22 burial periods for 23 bulls and multiply that by the average 18 years, you come up with 396 years. And that's all. That's short 210 years of this 606. There needs to be a lot more bulls in there than what they found. They're missing a lot of bulls, all right? And so this is a lot of bull. And all right. Now, that's just an indicator. It's like, and by the way, this Apis stela covers the entire TIP, the whole period of time, and more. And yet, we can't quite account for all that time. And this looks to me like this was done on purpose, because there's no good reason for that duration of time. There's no good reason for it. There's no scientific reason for that many years. This looks to me like it got slipped in there on purpose. All right. Secondly, a contradictory evidence to this is the genealogy of the royal architects. You know, everybody's looking for pharaohs all over the place. But you know what? Pharaohs aren't the only ones who kept records. As we see, they kept records of Apis bulls. And the Apis bull records are actually better than some of the pharaoh records. The problem with pharaohs is that over time, as a dynasty turns over, pharaohs kind of fall out of favor. And as a matter of fact, the first grave robbers were pharaohs because they stole from each other's. They even stole each other's graves, all right? Knocked their cartouche off and put their own cartouche on there. It was done all the time. Tutankhamun, you know that display of all of King Tut's gold and stuff? Belonged to Nefertiti. It belonged to him. He stole everything from her. All right, so that's what they did. And if you didn't like a pharaoh in another dynasty, which most dynasties didn't like other pharaohs in other dynasties, you might have even gone to some trouble to try to erase their name from history, which was done with the 13th dynasty. You know, the 13th dynasty suffered a huge amount of damage by later kings, especially of the 14th dynasty, trying to wipe out some of that period of time. So, you know, a lot of the damage was done by the pharaohs themselves. And why did they do it? They did it because they wanted the immortality themselves, and they wanted to take it away from the others. And so they were trying to make history forget that these people were ever there. And they succeeded in a lot of ways too, which causes us trouble today, right? You know, in trying to put this picture together, that's going to cause us trouble. There was sabotage going on way back then.
Well, they believe too that your riches you're buried with go with you to eternity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that would make sense too that they're trying to take away some of
Sure, yeah. You can go and steal everybody's loot, and they go to hell, you know, or wherever they go, you know, and you can take their place in the you know, whatever. Here's a good one. You're going to like this. Another contradiction. And by the way, there are 6 or 7 contradictions to this, so that's piling up. But here's my favorite one. All right. 2 kings, Asorkan II and Susanes the first. All right. And between these 2 guys, I can't remember the exact number, but I think it's somewhere around 160 years between these 2 dudes, okay? And they fall in the middle of the TIP, all right? So between Susanes and Asorkan is about 160 years between these 2 guys. All right, got that? This guy, and then this guy, over 100 years later. Good. You want to make sure that's there. Now watch this. We have his grave. We have his tomb. And it is his tomb because it's got his cartouche on it and it's never been messed with. You can tell. You can tell when nobody's erased a cartouche. Because if a cartouche is standing out from the wall, it's good because it's a part of the living stone. All right? But if it's recessed into the wall, like that, actually it would be like that, then somebody wiped the other one off and then recessed another one in. That's how you know that's not the right one, okay? Either that or they plastered it over it and you only have portions of the plaster yet left or something.
So how do you find out which one was the original right one?
The one that's standing out is the original.
But like you said, Nefertiti's tomb was the original and then Tutankhamun took it from
No, not her tomb, her treasures. Yeah. He's in his own tomb, but he's got her treasures in there, all right? All right, so that's a different story too. And there's a good book written on that by Joanna Fletcher. I think I told you about that. Great book. Yeah. All right. So Asorkins, we know where he was buried, where he is buried. Maybe he was buried. He may not be there now. We know his, and we know his. And his cartouche is good. So these two guys, we know where he is, and we know where he is. And these are good graves. All right? 160 years. Him first, him later. All right? Watch this. There is Asorkin's tomb is sitting kind of like that, close to Tanis. And this is Asorkin's, big O. And Susanes is sitting like this, kind of an odd angle like this. And right next to Susanes, there is a dais made of stone that goes way out there. And there's also little spots of stonework. That means there was a huge building right here. And it's got Asorkin's cartouche on it. He built this. All right? And I should have given you this. This temple complex with that dais right there has a little thing right here in the sand, which is the foundation of where a pylon went, which was holding the roof up of this building. Okay? Now, if you see one of these here, what do you expect to find?
More.
Yeah, or at least one more, which would be where? Exactly in the opposite place, there, which on our drawing here would be that what would be right there. All right? So it looks to me like Susanes was trying to avoid the temple when he was building his tomb. And to do that, he had to run into Asorkins, and he actually had to cut this away in order to fit his in, and also adjust some of the internal portions and move some of these things around on the inside. And you have to ask this question. Why is he doing all this stuff when Asorkin has not even been born yet? Nor died. And won't for 160 years. Asorkin was there first. That's clear. That's clear as day. Susanes is trying to avoid Asorkin's temple. And he's sliding his tomb in between the temple and Asorkin's tomb because he doesn't want to build over on this side, because this side has some other structures there, and also he would have to rebuild the sand stopping footings that they had to do to keep from burying their tombs over time. And so he is using all of the exterior structure to put his in right here. Which tells us there's something seriously wrong. 160 years. That's a lot of time off. And not only that, but Asorkin lived before Susanes and died before Susanes. Now you see what's happened to the TIP? It just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller until we have to ask the question, Was there ever a third intermediate period at all? And if there was, it couldn't have lasted more than 100 years, not 406. No more than 100, and probably not even that long. All right? Now, what does that do to history? Well, it does this. Here is late period. Here is TIP. And here is New Kingdom. You're going to expand the TIP the only place you can go is that way. You can't go this way. You can't expand it this way. Can't do. This has absolute dates attached to it. All right? This is a settled issue right here. You can't touch it. The only thing you can do is move it back, which is what you want to do anyway. That's what you want to do. You want to push all of it back 300 years. And I'm just saying 300 for now, because at least that much is how far it's been pushed back at this point. What's that going to do? It's going to move everything over. The whole thing moves over. So whatever agreement you may have had with the Bible, okay, let's say, watch this. Let's put it where it's supposed to be. Let's say the true TIP was that. And that this is the late period. And that what we have here is the 20th, 19th, 18th, 17th, 16th, 15th, etc. All right? And here's the Bible with its genealogy. And it's telling us that right here is when David and Solomon lived. 18th dynasty, David and Solomon live right here. And Solomon even marries Pharaoh's daughter. And we have Amarna letters here because this is the Amarna dynasty. And we have Amarna letters here that mention these guys. All right? And so we're very safe to say the Bible is in agreement with Egyptian history as long as we have David and Solomon in the 18th dynasty, about 1000 to 950 BC. All right? In that general period. Now what happens when we expand the TIP? Now, I'm putting the wrong things on. Now, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15. Now we're in the 20th dynasty. And the 20th dynasty doesn't look anything like, say, David and Solomon. Nothing. The whole country has gone downhill since that time. There's no relationship of this sort whatsoever. It's absolutely impossible for Solomon to marry a Pharaoh's daughter. They don't give their daughters away at this time to any foreigner. Everything is contradictory now. And this is the thing that's done it. This has pushed it out, and it's confused everything. And it throws the Bible out. And so everybody goes, well, the Bible's wrong. We can't rely on biblical history. But what's really wrong? Where's the fixed point and where is the sloppy accordion timeline? There it is right there. And what does Jesus say about how to build your foundation? Do you do it on sand or do you do it on a rock? All right? And this applies to history as well. Because if the history of the Bible is wrong, how can we believe in it? How can we believe in it? So somebody's got to come along and prove to us that it's wrong. And this ain't going to do it. That will not prove anything to us except that they are good at shuffling cards.
Seems they would have more contradictions if it's like the first picture where they have a bunch of different dots and lines. It seems like all of those would really contradict each other.
They do. Yeah, they all. And see, this is where we're going to get into where the effect of this gets into other histories. Because this affects all of them too. To the point to where the only way they can take all those dots and line them up the way they want them to be is they're going to have to put a great big 300-year dark age in everybody else's history. Levantine history, that is Palestinian history, Assyriology, Chinese, Mediterranean, Balkan, all of those histories, dependent upon this TIP, are going to have a 300-year dark age, which never existed. There is no proof that there ever was such a one.